The Chicago Bears beat the Arizona Cardinals, but it really shouldn't have been that close. And I left the win on Christmas not feeling great about the way they played against a clearly inferior team.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can find the Locked On Bears podcast on all of your favorite social media platforms, including YouTube, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. On the show today, we recap the Chicago Bears win over the Arizona Cardinals that ended up feeling less convincing after a really strong start. We'll talk about the, not collapse, but the decline, the drop-off, the once again sort of conservative approach to letting the Cardinals climb right back into it and almost giving you a little bit of a scare at the end, and how that it wasn't helpful for Justin Fields and how it started to overshadow what was otherwise another pretty darn strong defensive performance, and largely highlighted a lot of the ongoing issues that we see under the Matt Eberflus regime in Chicago. And that, to me, is kind of what I was left with, the big takeaway from the game. I was at the game. I took my mother there for Christmas. It was my Christmas present to her. We had a great seat, sat in the second row. It was a really great time. And it was a fun game to watch for the first quarter and a half when you go up 21-0. But then over the course of the game, the offense slows down, comes to a screeching halt is what it felt like. And the Cardinals slowly creep back in, and felt like this familiar feeling again of okay, Bears played well at the beginning, and then as the game goes on, the other team comes back, and all of a sudden you wondered if the Cardinals were going to tie it down the stretch. Down 14, they score the touchdown. They don't get the 2-point conversion, but they make it a one-possession game at the end. And certainly the defense held on, and they didn't blow it in the fourth quarter this time, but it felt like the rest of the team was doing their best to contribute to that. And against a team like the Arizona Cardinals, there's just not any excuse. They won. And so I didn't want to come on here and make this a big, I don't want to be overly negative after a win. We come on here and we try and enjoy and celebrate the wins, especially on Christmas, right? But we talked about it last week on the podcast leading up to the game. The Chicago Bears, if Matt Eberflus and Luke Getsy and to a lesser extent Justin Fields want to keep their jobs with this team, they had to show up against the Cardinals, show out, dominate, and send a message. Send a message that, hey, this Bears team right now in week 16 or week 15 is a lot better than the team that played earlier this season, and that this Bears team should be and is a lot better than a 3-win Arizona Cardinals team. And they needed to really prove that for 4 full quarters. They certainly looked that way through the first quarter, going up 21-0. I think it was early in the second quarter when that third touchdown was scored. All right, that was the stuff. That's how you look worlds better than a team picking in the top 5, top 3, like the Arizona Cardinals, right? You do that, but then for 4 quarters. That doesn't mean 4 quarters of scoring 21 points every quarter, but it's about dominating them. Your offense moving the ball at will. Your defense shutting them down completely. And the Bears could only do that for a little bit of time. This was the same Bears team that beat the now officially NFC North champion Detroit Lions just a couple of weeks ago, beat a formidable Vikings team, albeit one without its starting quarterback, almost beat those same NFC North leading Lions a couple weeks prior to that, took the Cleveland Browns, who looked like a strong playoff team, took them to the wire and probably should have won that game too. This was a Bears team. This is a Bears team that has gone up against legitimate I don't want to say Super Bowl contenders, depending on how you feel about the Lions and the Browns, but legitimate playoff teams, right? Legitimately, quote unquote, like good teams. Maybe not great teams, but good teams. The Bears went blow for blow with those teams. Won some, lost some, but like the loss to a team like the Browns, or to a lesser extent the Lions, like those are sometimes games where you feel like, okay, you win in there, you played a good team, and in a vacuum, okay, they won that game. You're not going to win that game every time. As long as you play them tough, you can feel like, man, the Bears are right there with these playoff teams. The Arizona Cardinals are not one of those teams. You should not be just right there with the Arizona Cardinals. But by the end of this game, it felt like, oh man, the Bears are just right there with the Arizona Cardinals. They were a one-possession game away from the Arizona Cardinals. They let the Cardinals make it close down the stretch. I know Bears got a field goal, made it 9, right? It finished a little bit farther than that, but there was a real fear. You could feel it in Soldier Field. You know, talking to the fans around me in our section, it's like, even I was walking back from the bathroom at halftime, and I don't remember, I just heard some random guy talking about, you know, the Bears, we were nervous about the game. And it's like, man, I've been here before. And I was like, you think they're going to blow this one at 21-0 or whatever the score was, 21-3 at the time? He's like, man, I've seen worse. Like, total stranger, but it's just like, there's a certain feeling among the fan base, even in the stadium, where it's like, are they going to hold on to this lead? And I couldn't help but be sitting there in my seat thinking about that guy for the whole third quarter and fourth quarter, being like, man, that guy's sitting over there going, yeah, I was right. Like, they're making it close again. And a lot of that to me feels like coaching decisions by Luke Getsy as an offensive play caller that we'll get into a little bit here. Certainly mistakes being made by players in terms of penalties and other issues that we'll get into a little bit here. And decisions by Matt Eberflus in terms of when to go for it, when to punt, when to settle for field goals, and just generally like their approach to how they were playing the Cardinals over the course of this game once they got that victory. But all of it was like, felt like playing down to your quality of opponent. And if you're Matt Eberflus and Luke Getsy and you're trying to keep your job and you're trying to send a message that, hey, we are the right coaches to keep moving this team forward, growing, advancing, playing better and better, getting better, showing progress. Like, this win over the Cardinals did not look like progress. It looked like more of the same. And more of the same has been not good enough. It's been failing to finish games, not playing quality football for 4 quarters. And even in a win, it's the exact kind of stuff that makes you want to fire your head coach, clean house on the coaching staff, and depending on your perspective, maybe go after a new quarterback as a result. I do want to get into a little bit more specifically what we saw from that quarterback and also what we saw from the offensive coordinator and the rest of the offense, because, you know, defense only gave up 16 points or whatever it ended up being in this game. It wasn't a bad defensive performance by any means. That was a winnable defensive performance, and we'll get into them as well, but really it's the offense that, again, you kind of wondered for a little bit there, would they be able to keep things rolling after that first quarter, and it was 2 field goals from that point. We'll kind of look at what went wrong with this Bears offense and how we kind of split up that blame next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. If you haven't played with FanDuel before, you're running out of time. There's only a few games left this season to get your bets in on your Chicago Bears. And right now is a great time to get started if you haven't, because new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. You bet $5 straight up on the Chicago Bears or any team to win their game. If they win their game, you get your winnings for your $5 bet and $150 of bonus bets added on top of that. So right now, the money line for Bears-Falcons, Bears are favored at home. It's a -162 money line for them. You bet that $5, you'll get $4 and some change back, plus $150 just by using FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Been thinking about joining FanDuel? Get in on the action now. Visit our URL, FanDuel.com/LockedOn, and get in on the action before it's too late. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. It's hard to sit here and complain too much about the Chicago Bears offense when by the end, they scored 27 points, and that is enough, certainly, to win football games. And they looked great for a quarter and a half. But I'm once again sitting there wondering, why can't this offense do it for 4 quarters? Why can't they sustain success? And it was hard to tell watching it live, but, having Christmas time off to be able to kind of go back through it again before we get to really sit down and talk about it on the podcast, like I got a little better appreciation for what was going on offensively. And it's another one of those games where it's easy to look at the stat sheet and see Justin Fields 15 of 27 for 170 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and a 71.5 passer rating and blame him. And I think generally when it comes to Justin Fields, any argument you try and make about Justin Fields that uses a stat in the box score, that looks at passing yards, rushing yards, touchdowns, interceptions, completion percentage, any argument around Justin Fields involving box score stats, to me, misses too much of the conversation. And I think that goes in both ways. If you try and use his box score stats to say he's playing really well, I think you're missing some of the mistakes he makes. And if you try and use his box score stats to say he's playing very poorly, I think you're missing some of what makes him very good. And some of what also around him isn't helping. Like, to me, when I watched this Bears-Cardinals game the first time and walking back through, like, I don't think Justin Fields played particularly well. But I really don't think Luke Getsy and the offensive play calling, nor the penalties and other mistakes by his teammates really helped all that much either. And to me, that encapsulates the entire Justin Fields argument. Like, it is not purely his fault when things go wrong. He is not the biggest problem or even a big problem, but he is at times part of the problem. And it's hard to sort of separate, like, okay, if you fixed the offensive coordinator situation and you cut down on, some of the other issues in terms of not having a lot of complementary receivers to DJ Moore right now and to be in a lot of penalties around this offense that make his job more difficult, that wouldn't solve all of the Chicago Bears offensive problems because Fields still does make mistakes. But how many of those problems would it solve? Would it solve enough problems that you would really want to stick with Justin Fields? Like, if we get in this game specifically, there were a couple of really bad throws by Justin Fields. Obviously, some great runs, and that's a really important part of the equation and not something that you can ignore or discount or take away from him. But he had a couple of passes that, well, one was picked off. We saw the bad interception in the end zone. They kind of underthrew it, thrown to Khalil Herbert. We did have DJ Moore open on a post and another receiver on a dig that may have been open also. Like, not a great delivery there. Even Khalil Herbert was kind of open. He just underthrew it, put too much air under it, and it got picked off. Bad pick at a bad time. Okay, but you can live with like one bad play in a game. They won, right? Again, they won the game. The offense did well enough. And in those first 3 touchdown drives, like, he was playing well. The offense was moving the ball well. He was delivering it to receivers and making plays. Like, that's what you want from Justin Fields. But he had another pass that should have been picked off, and a third one that I don't know if you call it interceptable, but there were 2 passes both in the right flat on checkdowns. One was a dropped interception. The other one was a pass breakup that I can't really call it a dropped interception, but it feels interceptable. A dangerous, ill-advised throws from Fields that could have gone very poorly. Like, a handful of those in this game. And then in terms of like the other side of the spectrum, the really big-time positive plays, like there was a really nice one that he layered into Cole Kmet on the left side of the field. That was kind of like in between the 3 defenders. That was a really nice throw. The rest, some good, but nothing else like great over the top. Like, he had that deep bomb to Cole Kmet in the first quarter, and really underthrown. He was never open on that play. Like, that wasn't a great Justin Fields throw. It wasn't a great Justin Fields decision. It was a bad play by the defensive back and a nice play by Cole Kmet to go get that ball. But like, it just feels like in the passing game in particular, with Fields, like, he got the job done, but there are still mistakes. It still struggles. And like, obviously he makes up for a lot of that with some of the great rushing that we saw in this game and we know Justin Fields is capable of. But in the National Football League, like, you need to be able to do a little bit more from the pocket, not even just from the pocket, but passing specifically, than what we saw from Justin Fields in the game against the Cardinals. Like, against good teams, that level of passing doesn't necessarily get the job done. Against teams when your defense isn't shutting them down for 16 points, that might not necessarily get the job done. Like, to me, Justin Fields right now is like if you picture like a car that's got all the bells and whistles. It's got turbo, it's got all the cameras, it's got all the sensors, it's got, adaptive cruise control, it's got self-driving tools. It's like, wow, man, this car is so much fun to drive, and it can go really fast, and it like has everything you would want in a car. But the starter doesn't always work. You put the key in the ignition, or I guess it would be push start, but you know what I mean? You put the key in the ignition and you turn it, it doesn't always turn over. And it's like, well, you really need the car to drive. And sometimes it drives, and when it drives, boy, is it cruising, and it's a great vehicle to drive in. But sometimes it's not driving. Sometimes it doesn't turn on. Sometimes it doesn't start. Sometimes it can't get you from point A to point B, despite having everything else you would really, really want in a car. And it's like, that's pretty important. Like, sure, you can sit there and do the starter a few times, and maybe it will start, and then you'll be fine. But if you're in a pinch and you really need your car to start because you really got to get somewhere in a hurry and your car's not starting, you're kind of out of luck. And that's what Justin Fields is like right now. Like, he's got like his scrambling ability, his mobility, and the playmaking that's natural to him. Like, right, that's the turbo in the car. That's all the cruise, the adaptive cruise control. I'm trying to think of other like car features. I'm not a big car person. Like, that's the convertible drop top, right? That's all the bells and whistles that are like, wow, that's an awesome car. And when that car is driving, you see that car drive by, and everybody wishes they had that car, right? But you don't see it when the car is not starting. When the starter's not working, the engine's not turning over, whatever it is, like, it's just not starting sometimes. And that's where you run into problems. And it's like, okay, how much are you willing to spend on a car that doesn't start all the time, but has everything else you really want in that car, especially when, that big car payment's due when the rookie contract wraps up. Like, that's what it feels like with Fields in this game. Like, it was enough to beat the Cardinals. And at times, when he plays in even better games, it's enough to beat the Lions. But, like, you end up falling a little bit short against the Browns. And maybe if you had a different offensive coordinator, I don't know if that's the keys in this analogy, it would start more often and maybe run even better. But I still think there are flaws within this vehicle that are not fixed, that are not just purely fixed by a better offensive coordinator. But then can you live with those while if you've got the better offensive coordinator? Like, that's the $1 million question. It's impossible to know until you actually get that new offensive coordinator in there. So that's where it just feels like in a game like this, it's tough with Justin Fields, because then they're running the ball over and over again, and they're getting penalties, so you're getting backed up. They get to 3rd and 1, and you have the play call on 3rd and 1 where they direct snap it to Roschon Johnson and try to send him up the middle and had Fields to run away from the ball. How Luke Getsy takes the ball out of Justin Fields' hand on 3rd and 1, direct snaps it to a rookie 4th-round pick running back in the shotgun, and has Bob Tonyan running split zone. Robert Tonyan doesn't block anyone on that play. He runs past the guy he was supposed to block, and that guy tackles Roschon Johnson. Like, he did not block a single player, and he was blocking at the point of attack, essentially, on this play. Bob Tonyan was supposed to be not the fullback, but almost like a fullback type wing lead blocker, kind of. It's a different mechanics, but same function in this play. Doesn't even touch him, runs by him, lets him run through and tackles Roschon Johnson. Like, not only are you getting the ball out of Justin Fields' hands, you're direct snapping it to Roschon Johnson, you're relying on Robert Tonyan as your sort of lead blocker in the play. I mean, it's just on 3rd and 1 and you're in shotgun, like, stuff like that. You're just like, how is Justin supposed to be super successful in that situation? Like, on that situation, he's not. And then it's 4th and 1 and they punt. Like, Justin can't do anything different on those when the play calls are like that. Like, that's where stuff is very clearly not Justin Fields' fault. But then there's the interception in the end zone that kills that drive, right? And there's the almost interceptions in the flat. And there's a couple of missed passes here and there that the team needs. And sure, guys are allowed to make mistakes, and no quarterback is perfect, but it's all part of this really complicated equation, and why even a win over the Cardinals just leaves you feeling like, God, this was the game for Justin to dominate a bad team. It's a bad Cardinals defense. They should have wiped the floor at them from the first quarter to the fourth quarter. 21 points in the first quarter, and then, give me a touchdown each quarter from here on out. Like, move the ball well. You don't got to run it. You don't got to put up 70 points like the Dolphins did earlier this season. No, it's not about the points. It's never been about the numbers for Fields. It's about the eyes, what you see and what you feel when you watch him. And like, this offense just petered out after that first quarter. And a lot of it was the play calling. Some of it was Justin. And that's been the story of the season for this Bears offense, and why, like, even in a win, it feels like almost a losing offensive performance, because 3 quarters of that game were what we were used to seeing all season, but they did so well in the first quarter that it carried them through the rest of the way, especially when the Bears defense continues to play at a really, really high level. We'll go through some of what they did well against the Cardinals, including finishing this game and not blowing it in the end of the fourth quarter and still holding this Cardinals offense down very effectively, next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Gametime, the best way to get tickets for all of your favorite live events. I went to this Bears-Cardinals game on Sunday. I bought my tickets on Gametime, and I used our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off. And I'll tell you what, absolute great deals on Gametime. We sat in the second row in the corner of the end zone, And I think I paid $110 per ticket. I think that's what it was. And it was a Christmas present from my mom. And it was a lot of fun. It was and it was the closest she's ever sat at a football game, absolutely. And it was super cool, and all the fans around us were really nice people, and we just had a great time. We saved a bunch of money with Gametime, got a great deal. You could see our view from our seats before we bought a ticket, so we knew, okay, we're in the corner of the end zone. Is that kind of far away? How will we be able to see? No, it was perfect. It was a great experience. Super easy to use their app and make the ticket purchase as well. It transferred right into my Ticketmaster account. It was great. Honestly, I can't recommend Gametime enough because I literally use it myself. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Once again, the Chicago Bears defense played really well against an opponent that they absolutely should have played very well. And it's like I wanted the offense to kind of match some of that in its level of play against the Cardinals. And, I was really encouraged by their ability to hold on through the final 4 quarters of this game. That defensive performance, nothing to sneeze at on Sunday, absolutely. And to me, you started to get that nervousness a little bit when the Cardinals brought it to a 1-possession game, but to hold on the 2-point conversion and then to obviously shut down Kyler Murray from there really was a nice way for this defense to finish and play really more of that 4 quarters of solid football that we wanted to see. 4 quarters of solid football doesn't mean flawless. Doesn't mean 0 touchdowns allowed, right? Doesn't mean no mistakes. But it does mean when you make a mistake, you don't let it cascade and become a bigger problem. You don't let the Cardinals keep crawling back in. They had the big touchdown to, is it Greg Dortch? Is that how you say that receiver's name? He's their kick returner, speedster guy. Greg Dortch. I guess there's not really an S in there. The tiny kid out of Wake Forest. That play was rough. Tyreek Stevenson slips on the grass as he kind of cuts. Eddie Jackson takes the world's worst angle and then makes a very poor tackle attempt as Dortch runs past him into the end zone. Rough. But other than that, that was the main rough moment. Sure, they gave up a touchdown to James Conner and stuff. It wasn't terrible, but that was kind of it. They didn't let those mistakes become okay, all of a sudden the Cardinals climb back in the fourth quarter. They had that big play. They responded with great defense, great coverage, great pass rush on the 2-point conversion. Boom. Next drive, your offense does nothing with the ball, and the Cardinals get it back because, of course, that's how all these fourth quarters have gone for the Bears all season, win or lose for some reason. Then what do? They keep the play in front of them. They get after Kyler Murray a little bit. He throws some incomplete passes, and ultimately you stop him on 4th and 6. Bears get the ball back. And then, of course, end up driving down and just getting a field goal because they had great field position but couldn't do anything with it. But that was such a key Bears 4th down stop on that drive where the Cardinals got the ball back, down 1 touchdown with 4.5 minutes to go, and the Bears defense held firm. And that's exactly what you wanted to see in this game. They got some pressure on Kyler Murray. They really shut down at least the handoff running game. James Conner had under 4 yards a carry. The backup running back only had 10 yards. Kyler Murray had a couple of nice scrambles in there, but other than that, they were under 100 yards rushing across the board and pretty good yards per carry average stopped by this Bears defense. And even when it comes to Kyler Murray, we were so focused in on the big tight end, Trey McBride, being a guy who you thought could do a lot of damage to you, or maybe some deep shots to Wilson going deep, and they didn't really get any of that going. McBride had 6 catches, but it was only 31 yards. His longest play was 10. They checked it down to him a few times. He made a couple of nice catches, but it wasn't anything crazy there. Dortch had the big 38-yard catch and run, and that was the one that was the embarrassing one we talked about. But that was kind of it. Everything else was underneath. It was dumping off to the running backs over and over again. They're 2 leading receivers, or just 2 of their 3 leading receivers, with the running backs Conner and Demercado. So that's everything this Bears defense wants. Get some pressure on Murray, take away the deep stuff. You can check it down to your running back all day, and the Bears will absolutely live by that and enjoy the merits of that. And then, of course, you got just some really nice pass breakups in there from Tyreek Stevenson had a couple of nice plays. Terrell Smith had a couple of nice plays. Kyler Gordon got a sack on the quarterback and another pass breakup in there too. This secondary was playing well. Montez Sweat had a nice batted pass when he was getting after Murray. It wasn't Murray did nothing, like he's going to make some plays. Like he's a dynamic athlete at the quarterback spot. And there were going to be times when he'd scramble and get first downs. And there are times when he's frustrating as a defense. Sure. But you can live with that. You know, the Bears defense lived with that and held the Cardinals to 16 points. Like that's exactly the kind of stuff that you're looking for there. To bend a little bit through this game is fine. To make sure they don't break at the end of the fourth quarter, like that to me is what really set this game apart for me with this Bears defense, where it's like, all right, they, even when things maybe got a little wobbly, which you can expect against Murray, they were there for it. And like that's what you need to see from this Bears team as it tries to fight in these final, now 2 games left in this regular season. And that's what we needed to see from this Bears offense. But like there's a top-down philosophy of like, we get a lead, we go conservative on offense, conservative on defense, we kick field goals, we punt, we hand the ball off, we don't get too aggressive or anything, and we let teams come back in. They start coaching not to lose instead of coaching to win. And the defense the defense doesn't make a difference to them whether they're coaching not to lose or win. The defense is still going to try and generally play hard and get after the quarterback. Maybe they blitz a little less or whatever down the stretch, but for the most part, the defensive play calling and performance isn't going to shift too much by game situation, although it has in some games. But like we talked about it on a recent podcast, right? Like why have the Bears collapsed in some of these fourth quarters defensively? To me, it's like young guys and other inexperienced players, like sometimes a little bit out of position. Just every once in a while, it's kind of fluky, but happens when you've got younger players still adjusting to the NFL game. Like to me, that's a little bit more of what happened on the big Dortch touchdown, right? It's like Stevenson slips and other guys are out of position, and then obviously Eddie Jackson took a couple bad angles in this game. But like, okay, mistakes like that happen. You can live with it as long as those don't cascade, which they didn't in this game, which was, again, like progress from this Bears defense after we saw those mistakes cascade against the Browns and cascade earlier in the season against the Lions and in multiple games over the course of this year. To me, the defense absolutely checked all the boxes you could hope for from them, and that's a pretty. But against the Arizona Cardinals, like you don't leave that feeling like super impressed, like oh man, the Bears offense just shut down, or excuse me, the Bears defense just shut down a great offense. Like this to me was this defense did what we expected, right? That they should come in and not let the Cardinals do very much. Maybe you give up a touchdown here, some field goals there. Okay, that's meeting expectations. For how good this defense is playing, this was like meeting expectations. Exceeding expectations of the defense is a shutout, is 3 points, is under 10, single digits, maybe even 10 or fewer. Under 13, I guess under 11 would be like exceeding expectations. Like, okay, this Cardinals offense got nothing. That would have been to me like the A+ defense against the Cardinals, whereas like holding them 16 against a good team is an A+ performance. Against a bad team, I'm not trying to put a letter grade and all this like it's a test, but like that, that's more the meeting expectations, the C to B range. I mean, they didn't get any turnovers as far as I remember, and I'm double checking the stat sheet while I'm talking to you. I don't remember any turnovers. Like, there's always room for defensive improvement, but they absolutely got the job done. And I have no real complaints about what we saw defensively in this game. I just, wanted to see more from the offense after the first quarter, and that's where you still left leaving this game like, man, why was this so close? Like, why did this end up feeling close? And to me, it wasn't so much the defense screwing up; it was just the offense getting out of its way, not being able to get out of its own way, and ultimately, like that's what feels so frustrating about this Bears team is so often they either beat themselves or they at least make life harder on themselves with penalties, with conservative play calling, with mistakes by players, and it just is like, man, that's the kind of stuff that makes you not feel like the coaching staff is coming back, or certainly not wanting the coaching staff coming back, and that's the kind of stuff that will ultimately play into Justin Fields' future, whether it's his fault or not in a lot of those cases. So that's why it's a complicated win over the Arizona Cardinals. I tried not to be, I really didn't want to be like overly negative about it, right? This is not a aggressively negative podcast in any way. I never want to be, my favorite thing is when people accuse me of being too negative and people accuse me of being too positive. That tells me I'm doing something right? Because then people are seeing what they want to see and are seeing it on both sides. And I think generally this season, after Bears wins, even against a bad Panthers team and even against a bad Raiders team, we come on this podcast and we look at all the positive in that game. I think I've done a pretty good job this season of like not being negative after wins and being able to kind of take some of those positives. And I hope getting the defense here was definitely one of those positives. And the Bears' offensive running game, Khalil Herbert was great. Justin Fields was great as a runner. Like they were absolutely moving the ball at will on the ground. Cole Kmet made some fantastic catches in the game. Those are all really positive, fun things. It was a fun game to be at and watch. Absolutely. Like this is not like a loss type situation, but it's like, man, We said on the front end before the game, got to dominate. Didn't really dominate. And to me, like, that's a disappointment because it's about expectations versus what they produced. Expectations should be higher against a team like the Cardinals, and it seemed like they played down to the Cardinals, and that's where we're left with 2 weeks left as Matt Eberflus and company try and save their jobs. I don't feel like the Cardinals win move the needle that much for them. It was better than a loss, but how much better? I don't know. Falcons will be another good barometer for them because they're another team. Like, are they any good? Are they not? We don't really know. Doesn't seem like they're that great, but the Bears can't seem to play well against not great teams. I think the Packers game will have a lot to do with it. We'll break down both of those matchups in the coming days and weeks here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. That's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming back tomorrow for more of your Bears coverage. Thursday, we'll do Crossover Thursday with Aaron Freeman from Locked On Falcons. Friday, we'll put together a game plan, and before you know it, we'll be in 2024 talking Bears football for another year with you here on the Locked On Bears podcast. And even next year, we'll still be coming to you 5 days a week to give you another opportunity to bear down.